The Las Vegas Raiders had practice earlier today, and quarterback Aidan was not at practice for the Raiders, and it left a lot of people kind of confused as to what is happening with AOC. And the injury report actually has officially come out now, and we know exactly what happened with Aidan O'Connell. Aidan O'Connell was not at the Raiders practice because he has some sort of illness, and he did not participate for the Las Vegas Raiders, which ultimately opened the door for Desmond Ridder. And I want to talk about Aidan O'Connell in this video because Aidan O'Connell looked really, really good for the Raiders against the Chiefs. And I think as we kind of go forward, we're going to find out a lot about Aidan O'Connell in these final 5 games. And more than that, we're going to find out a lot about this team. Now, before we go forward, I want to just share with you guys my picks for Underdog Fantasy. We're going to do picks for the Thursday Night Football game, make it a little bit more interesting coming up here in a couple of hours. It's a $5 entry for $200 is the payout. We're going to take the higher on Jordan Love because I think the Green Bay Packers are going to have to throw the ball a lot. I think there's a chance the Detroit Lions are going to get up early in this game, and I think the Packers are going to kind of play catch up. And some of these picks kind of follow that same trend, right? I think that's ultimately what's going to end up happening. So I think Jordan Love's going to throw the ball a little bit more. So I'm going to take the higher that he'll have at least 253 passing yards. I think as soon as the Lions get up, Jamari Gibbs is going to end up being able to run the ball as well because the Lions are going to want to kind of waste that clock out a little bit. So I'm going to take the higher on Jamari Gibbs. I think he's one of the most talented running backs in the NFL. As the Lions get up, I think Josh Jacobs is not going to get the amount of carries he's gotten over the past couple of weeks. I think against the Dolphins this past week, he had like 20 carries for like 50 yards. So I'm going to take the lower on Josh Jacobs. I think he might have not as many carries this game, especially since I think the Lions will end up putting up a lot of points. And then with that, with the Packers throwing the ball, I think Jayden Reed will also end up getting a touchdown. Jayden Reed is the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL, in my personal opinion. And then I also think Rashawn Gary will get at least 1 sack. Rashawn Gary has not had a great season this season, but the Detroit Lions have some offensive linemen out. Now, one of the things to note with this pick here specifically is it's going to increase that multiplier a lot, right? So Underdog does not think Rashawn Gary will get a sack because of the fact that the Lions have one of the best tackles in the NFL in Penei Sewell. But one of the things to note is Gary has been moving around a little bit more the past couple of weeks. So I think if Gary ends up lining up over that left tackle who's out at the moment, I think he has a shot to actually get a sack. Even if he's not lined up over there, I think if he's lined up towards the Penei Sewell side, the Packers bring 5 guys a lot, right? So what that means is Gary could easily go up against the right guard while they bring another guy off that side, right? So the Packers defense runs a little bit different. I think Gary's going to get a sack, especially since it's on national TV, right? It's a primetime game. Let me know what you guys think, man. If you guys have never used Underdog before, there's a link down in the comments below. Click that link, sign up, and also tag me on Twitter with your picks, man. I'd love to talk to you guys about some of the picks, your guys' thought process behind some of them. Obviously, for me today, my entire thought process is that the Detroit Lions are going to score points, right? And then the Packers are going to try to match that. So we'll see if that actually ends up happening. Alrighty, guys, let's just get right back into this video. But it does make sense that he has some sort of illness, and he's likely to be back for the Raiders come Sunday. I'd be very shocked at this point if Aidan O'Connell does not play for the Raiders on Sunday. But Desmond Ridder did take the snaps today, and for whatever reason, if Aidan O'Connell is unable to play, it will be Ridder that ends up taking those snaps in the game. And then Carter Bradley will probably end up being the backup quarterback at that point. But I want to talk about Aidan O'Connell a little bit, because it got me thinking, like, what if he does actually miss? And is there even a benefit of having Aidan O'Connell the rest of the season? The Raiders play the Jacksonville Jaguars, who don't have their starting quarterback at this point. We're also going to end up playing the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints aren't really that good either. So there's 2 games on this schedule that's 100% winnable, and we still play the Chargers. That's another winnable game. The Raiders have 3 games that I would say are winnable games for the Las Vegas Raiders. And what's crazy is there's a big difference having Aidan O'Connell out there versus not having him out there. Right, the offense looked a lot better against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, some people will also say, was that because of Scott Turner or is that because of Aidan O'Connell? And I looked at some of the stats. The Raiders offense definitely got a huge boost 3 weeks ago when Scott Turner ultimately ended up taking over. You guys can just look at some of these stats. Yards per game. The Raiders had essentially more 300-yard games in the past 3 weeks than the first 9 weeks. So I guess it's the same technically, right? They had 3 300-yard games on offense. And they only had 3 up to that point in the first 9 of the 12 games, right? So it's not just the yards per game as well, right? If you look at the Raiders' yards per play, I mean, it's night and day difference under Scott Turner. And let's be honest, right? The tape actually backed all this up, right? Looking at the stats just kind of confirmed what the tape had already shown. But you guys can see like 5.3 yards per play against the Dolphins, 5 yards against the Broncos, 6.9 yards against the Chiefs. Look prior to Scott Turner, right? 3.7 against the Bengals is a huge difference. 4.1, 4.2. It has not looked as good as it's looked ultimately this week for the Raiders, or the last 3 weeks, I should say, for the Raiders. And more than that, even the run game's gotten going the last 2 weeks, right? 4.3, 4.6. That's some of the best yards per attempt that we've had in any game this season. The Raiders' offensive line's coming together. The offensive coordinator's much better. And the quarterback this past week played really, really good, right? Aidan O'Connell really ran that offense well. And I think for the Raiders, as we go into the next couple of games, we just got to figure it out, right? Is Aidan O'Connell the quarterback of the future, right? And I know some people are going to continue to fight against that, but I would make the argument that the Raiders are a better team if they have a quarterback that is a future, franchise quarterback, and they can use whatever pick they end up having on the best player coming out of this class. I would make the argument you're a better team if you can go down that route. Of course, that doesn't mean Aidan O'Connell will actually show it. He might not actually be good. The Raiders might drop the quarterback anyways. But Aidan O'Connell did not practice today, but he should be good to go. Hopefully, we'll see what ends up actually happening. The offense clearly looks a lot better. And it's not just because of Scott Turner. In fact, I would make the argument that Sincere McCormick has been a huge difference for the Raiders over the last 2 weeks. As you guys know, Alexander Mattison ended up getting hurt against the Dolphins, and Sincere McCormick got called up from the practice squad. And after the last 2 weeks, this guy has actually officially been signed to the active roster. And I want to talk about this because I know a lot of people are going to overlook this, but this is huge. From a contract perspective, this is huge. For Sincere McCormick himself, this is huge. Right? The salary of being a practice squad player versus being on an active roster is massive. Right? It is absolutely massive. So shout out to Sincere McCormick for officially signing to the active roster. Also realize that when you're on the practice squad, which Sincere McCormick was on for the last 3 years essentially, and even after the Dolphins game, I don't think he was active during the Dolphins game, but the Broncos game he was active. Even once that game ended, this guy actually technically reverted back to the practice squad, which means any team could have just taken him at any point up until that Chiefs game, right? And in the Chiefs game, we once again reactivated him. And although he had a really good game against the Broncos and an even better game against the Chiefs, the Raiders realized that if you don't sign this guy right now, the Niners might jump in, or one of these other teams that need a running back right now might jump in and actually steal this guy from the roster. So the Raiders smartly signed Sincere McCormick to the active roster. And as we go forward, we're going to see Sincere McCormick play a lot more. In fact, Antonio Pierce talked about it. And he said the Raiders will use Sincere McCormick a lot more. He'll be getting a lot more carries, which is what AP said. And in the same context, he also kind of talked about McCormick and said that this guy has looked good. From the training camp, he's looked good. Preseason, he's looked good. But what's interesting to me is if he's looked good, why has Sincere McCormick not played more? Right? If this guy has looked good, if this guy's been doing well, why has he not been playing more for the Raiders? I would make the argument our running back room was really, really bad this season. Coming in with Zamir White, absolutely terrible room to have as, if he's your starting running back. Alexander Mattison did make it a little bit better. Dylan Labe really didn't show us anything up to this point. And if Sincere McCormick actually flashed, why would he have not gotten more carries? Why did it take injuries to ultimately our two guys ahead of him, and even Amir Abdullah was kind of average, right? He's more of a third down player. Why did it take for the Raiders this long to let this guy actually get carries? Now, I'll be the first to tell you guys, right? There's a big difference between being a zone running back and a power running back. When you're running a power scheme, a lot of it is really, it's a lot easier, and a lot of it also depends on if your offensive line is just, physically better than the defensive guys up front. Sincere McCormick has benefited a little bit from the fact that the offensive line's a lot better now than it was, let's say 8 weeks ago. When the Raiders run power or whatever it is, Sincere McCormick has it a lot easier now than whoever the running back was 8 weeks ago. And when you filter out the power run and the zone run, the Raiders aren't running a lot of zone anymore, right? So I want to see what Sincere McCormick is in the zone scheme specifically, right? That's all I'm trying to say is before we crown Sincere McCormick as a future, let's see what he can do the rest of this season. Let's run a little bit more zone because I think zone is the best scheme in the NFL. Allows you to have those explosive plays. But McCormick's looked good, so hopefully he continues it, and I'm glad the Raiders actually signed him to the active roster. Talking about signing a player, the Raiders went out and signed a former Bengals wide receiver who ran a 4.31 40-yard dash, which is absolutely crazy. So DJ Turner obviously ended up getting hurt, so the Raiders needed to go out there and get a wide receiver. And they went out and signed a guy who has played in the NFL for a couple of years. He's had a little bit of success as well. His name is Shaderick Jackson. He's actually the nephew of Bo Jackson, who a lot of you guys know. But this was an interesting pickup, right? Shaderick Jackson, interesting signing. He might not play a whole lot, right? But DJ Turner did play a lot for the Raiders. And we did sign a couple of wide receivers over the last couple of weeks. DJ Turner is one of those guys that did a lot of motioning. He did a lot of that orbit stuff. He ran deep oftentimes. So we need a guy to really replace that type of production for us. So Shaderick Jackson can actually end up playing more for the Raiders than some of these other guys, right? Trey Tucker is really not used as that influence guy anymore. So as we go forward, we need a guy like DJ Turner that can run those route concepts. And I think Shaderick Jackson probably makes sense. 4.31, right? You can't coach speed. I don't want to overhype anyone, right? Because we've done that in the past with certain guys. But I love the fact that the Raiders are bringing in guys that have traits, and they're trying to make those traits work, right? We brought in a guy in Clavon Chasen, and I remember when we brought him in, I said, this guy has tremendous upside, right? And that was because he had real upside, and we're seeing that upside actually kind of come together. But it was also because I am bought into the Patrick Graham scheme and system. I also think Rob Leonard's a good coach. And of course, Antonio Pierce is a good head coach in terms of getting the most out of guys. This is a little bit different, right? This is more so of it's a wide receiver. You got to run routes to get the ball. It's a little bit harder than pass rushing, I would say. And that too, you got to learn the whole scheme and system. We don't really know what Shaderick Jackson's going to end up bringing, but I do like the fact that the Raiders are bringing in guys with traits, right? He's fast, and you can utilize that. You can have this guy run deep, and we saw what Aidan O'Connell did this past week where he hit a couple guys deep. So we'll see what ends up happening. I personally like the pickup. We'll see what he can actually end up bringing to the Raiders. I want to know what you guys think, man. Aidan O'Connell going into these next couple of games, what are your expectations for him? What are your expectations for Sincere McCormick? And then do you guys think Shaderick Jackson is going to bring any sort of value to the Raiders? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.